Hello, everyone. Since we are not meeting in person today, I wanted to give you a little bit of information about your upcoming assignments and some context for the reading that you completed today. You'll remember that I asked you to read the entirety of Lope de Vega's 1614 play, Fuente Ovejuna. So this is a play that was written in 1614 during the Spanish Siglo de Oro, or Golden Age. Like the English Renaissance, this is a period of great expansion and innovation, both politically and in the arts. We've seen some of the political effects of expansion in our readings from the couple class periods that we've just had by Columbus and Cortez and de las Casas. This is also an era that is characterized by very modern political concerns as a result, in part, of all of this expansion. Your text puts it this way on page 591, quote, "The new political reality destabilized the traditional balance of power, pitting older arrangements against the necessities of the new state. These political quandaries were hardly abstract questions. They governed the everyday realities of taxation, political representation, and social hierarchy." And this is something that they do even today, I think. So, given the huge expenditures of exploration and conquest, people in Spain were worried about questions like, what a ruler could take from them, and under what conditions the ruled could rise up and defend themselves. These are themes that we'll see being explored in great detail in Lope de Vega's Fuente Ovejuna. Lope de Vega was, and even is today, an enormously popular playwright in Spain, and he rivals Shakespeare in his significance. He had a very interesting and complicated personal life also. He was a soldier, he was a poet, a playwright, a lover. He had many, many affairs that he wrote about in his poems. He was a husband twice over, and he was a father as well to at least 16 children from various relationships. He was also a priest, however, and also a censor in the Inquisition. So he had a very colorful life, and it was complex as well. Lope de Vega was contemporary with Miguel de Cervantes, who wrote Don Quixote, which is often seen to be the very first novel ever written. Cervantes is actually the only author who wrote more than Lope de Vega. Lope de Vega wrote almost 2,000 plays, though we only have a pitiful 425 of them. This is actually about 387 more plays than Shakespeare, who actually wrote only about 38, give or take. Lope de Vega also wrote thousands of sonnets, some novels and novellas. He also wrote epic poems. Fuente Ovejuna actually has a sonnet embedded in it, and it's spoken by the main female character, Florencia. This is important because she's one of the only women in any commedia who actually speaks in this authoritative form, which, as we've seen, is characterized largely by a masculine voice. Lope de Vega is important not only for how many plays he wrote, but also for the content he wrote about and the style he employed. He popularized a particular form of the commedia, a three-act secular play, as opposed to sacred plays, that was often of a mixed genre, and it employed both comic and serious subplots. It drew on character types like the village clown. We see Mengo in Fuente Ovejuna being characterized as this type. Okay? We have the evil governor, the commander, the comendador. We have his sycophantic servants. Okay? We also have a type like the brave lover, okay, who is Frondoso in this play, and so on. These plays were very popular. People of all classes and sexes went to them. And in Spain, Lope de Vega's plays would have been performed in what are called corrales. And these are public courtyard theaters that were mostly open air, and they were created by the spaces between buildings that formed a square. Okay? These were the very first places that were built particularly for showing theatrical events. Before the 16th century, there were no purpose-built theaters. In the corrales, specific seating areas were defined for specific classes and sexes and occupations. Women sat in what were termed cazuelas, on the upper two levels of the courtyard corrales, and members of the clergy sat in what was called the tertulia on the uppermost level. And then there were musketeers, or young men, who sat or stood often in the patio area in front of the stage. This is a lot like the way that the pit functioned in, say, an English Renaissance theater like the Globe. Some important people could also be seated in the upper areas behind the stage so that they could be seen by the audience as well. Lope de Vega's comedias are about subjects that are both high and low, elevated and base, as we might say. In Puente Ovejuna, we have a very good example of this combination. He's writing about matters of national significance, like the question of political authority, who has it, what makes it just, what is its nature, and the implicit contract between the governed and the governing. But he's putting these questions into a real-life context. Not only did the events that are described in Puente Ovejuna actually occur in history, but Lope de Vega has fleshed out that historical event with a cast of characters that are humorous, flawed, desiring, individualized, and community-driven, even as they are types. The play uses a plot-subplot dynamic to show how the fate of a nation is intertwined with the fate of a village, and even perhaps the fate of two particular, the play uses the plot-subplot dynamic to show how the fate of a nation is intertwined with the fate of a village, and even actually the fate of two particular people, Laurencia and Frondoso, whose love, like the well-being of the community, is threatened violently. This is a play that explores important issues of power and governance, too. We see people who rule by divine right, or not. Right? We see people who rule by force, which is put vividly into the context of rape. And we see those whose rule is validated by the consent of the people. Most significantly, though, Puente Ovejuna is a play about the power of community, with love for the other as the self as its underlying feature. The plot of the play is drawn from events that happened much earlier in the 1470s, when Spain was in a civil war. Ferdinand and Isabella, and you'll remember them from our earlier conversations about, say, Christopher Columbus. Ferdinand and Isabella were securing their monarchical authority from a rival claim to the throne by Juana and Alonso. So in the play, a cruel governor, the comendador, or the commander in your translation, is abusing his subjects, both physically and economically. The economic portion of this is important as well. Okay, we want to focus on the physical, but the economic abuse that the town undergoes is also very significant. Okay, so keep that in mind as you read. The comendador is abusing his subjects. He and his superior, the master, are also moving against Ferdinand and Isabella with the hope of securing more advantage under the different rulers, under Juana and Alonso. Meanwhile, the villagers are trying to make sense of what their duty is to the comendador, to the king and queen, and to each other. Laurencia later will incite the men in the village to rise up and basically have some self-respect. Ultimately, they rebel, the whole town rebels against the commander, and they rise up to kill him and several of his subordinates. And then basically an inquisitor comes and tries to figure out what happened. The townspeople stick together despite the torture, and ultimately they're pardoned. So there's some really interesting plot points here that I hope we have a chance to discuss. So next class we're going to discuss Puente Ovejuna, so I'd like you to think in particular about these moments and particular issues in the text. So think about the discussion of love and community between Laurencia and Mengo in Act 1, Scene 2. Consider particularly how love, consent, and rape function as metaphors throughout the play. You might note, incidentally, that later in Act 3, Esteban will describe the village as a woman who has been ravished and abused and whose honor has been lost. So how do love, consent, and rape seem to function as metaphors in the play? And how do women function, too? It's a larger question. Also, note that the townspeople welcome the commander in Act 1, Scene 2, right after the scene with Laurencia and Mengo. The village people give him food and wine and livestock and all sorts of other things as proof of their love. And they use this word around line 395. After everyone has left, then, the commander accosts Laurencia and Pascuala, another woman in the town, and he asks, "Aren't you mine?" by right, around line 432. So this ties into issues of authority and also ownership and honor that I think are evident throughout the play. The commander's sense of his rights to Laurencia's body and Frondoso's defense of her in Act 1, Scene 4 is also very interesting. This is the place where the commander basically ambushes Laurencia while she's doing laundry in the woods, and Frondoso meets up with her, and he basically defends her from the commander. He takes the commander's crossbow and threatens him with it. This is a really important scene that kind of encapsulates a lot of issues having to do with the way the play understands authority and resistance. In a later scene, this moment will kind of be repeated in an interesting way. In Act 2, Scene 3, take a look at the marriage between Frondoso and Laurencia, which is interrupted by the commander. It's at this moment when the commander also beats Esteban, the mayor of the village, with his own staff of office, right? So that's in Act 2, Scene 3, after the interrupted marriage between Frondoso and Laurencia. This moment really should remind you of the earlier scene when Frondoso takes the commander's bow. Right? So you might consider again issues of authority, but also the significance of the commander interrupting this marriage, right? Take a look at the scene where Laurencia kind of tears into the men of the town in Act 3, Scene 1 for not defending it and for not defending her and the other women. She basically calls them all half men, and what else does she call them? She calls them cowardly as little girls, powder puffs, spinning women, right? She calls them sheep, lambs, right? And a variety of other kind of epithets. She really lays into them. For not defending the town and the honor of the town. Right? She incites them to, quote, regain their lost honor, around line 167 as well. So again, suggesting that, like the women, their honor has been compromised too. They all go out after that, armed, and then kill the commander and his men. The women participate in this rebellion significantly. So take a look at that scene. Take also a look at the scene when Isabella and Ferdinand send inquisitors to Fuente Ovejuna to interrogate the villagers. What do they do? Right? What do the villagers do? Do they cave or do they stand firm? How do they describe their violent overthrow of the commander? Right? Consider how this might tie into discussions of love and community in Act 1, Scene 2. As an overall consideration, you might note the way that the war for the throne of Spain is being waged in the intervening scenes, and how this parallels the commander's abuse of Fuente Ovejuna. And similarly, the love that Ferdinand and Isabella have for one another also parallels that between Laurencia and Frondoso. So what do you think the significance is here? And then finally, consider how the play ends, because it ends in a very interesting way. What do you think Lope de Vega is suggesting about just governance, for instance, about the right of the people to rise up violently? Okay, is this a play about anarchy, right? Or is this a play about another form of just governance? Or is this a play about a social contract? So those are some questions I'd like you to consider, some particular scenes I'd like you to look at in more detail, and we'll kind of go over the play as a whole when we meet next class.